Simone Davis stood at the chalkboard of her fifth-grade classroom in Lincoln Heights Elementary, her voice weaving through the hum of Detroit's gray morning. At 34, her warm tones guided a room of restless kids, pencils scratching, eyes flickering with curiosity, her worn blouse a testament to years of teaching on a shoestring. Tonight, February 25, 2025, she'd faced another jab from Margaret Pierce, the school's principal. "Stick to worksheets, Davis," Pierce had snapped, dismissing Simone's lesson plan in front of staff. Simone adjusted her glasses, pouring the sting into her teaching, patient, steady, hers. She was used to it, the sidelong glances, the assumption she was less. But tonight, a letter waited, a spark in the shadows. Earlier that day, Simone had stood in Pierce's office, her hands clutching a proposal for a reading program. The room smelled of stale coffee and authority. Pierce's desk, a fortress of paperwork. "This isn't your lane," Pierce had said, barely glancing at the pages before sliding them back. Her smirk cut deep. Her assistant, a pinched woman named Carol, snickering from the corner. Simone had argued, her voice calm despite the heat in her chest, but Pierce waved her off. "Leave the ideas to me, Davis," she'd laughed, turning to her computer. Simone left, head high, but the rejection gnawed, a familiar ache from years of being overlooked. Back at her modest apartment in Detroit's East Side, Simone sank onto a faded couch, her proposal still in hand. She'd grown up here, her mother a factory worker, her grandmother, Clara Washington, a teacher who'd filled their home with books and dreams. "You've got my fight, Simone," Clara would say, her voice a balm. Simone had taught since, tough schools, tight budgets, her passion a lifeline after her mother's passing. Lincoln Heights was her battleground, but Pierce's disdain was a wall. She'd fought for her kids, scraping for supplies, her dreams buried under bureaucracy. But tonight, something shifted, a whisper of change. Exhaustion tugged as Simone tossed her keys on the table, a chipped relic from her youth. An envelope caught her eye. No stamp, just her name in frail ink. Curiosity beat weariness as she tore it open. Inside were 2 sheets, a legal document, thick with text and a handwritten note. Her breath caught as she read, "Simone, my warrior, the district's yours now. Grandma Clara." Clara Washington, the educator who died last month, had left her something. The document was her will, naming Simone Davis sole heir to the Detroit Public School District via a secret trust. She slumped back, hands trembling. This wasn't just a classroom, it was her kingdom. Sleep eluded Simone, as the will sat under a dim lamp, its words a lesson she'd never learned. Clara had been her rock, a fierce woman who'd taught in Detroit's roughest schools, shaping policy in the shadows. Simone recalled tales, Clara's chalk-stained hands, her voice rallying for kids, sidelined by a system that forgot her. She'd watched Simone teach, her quiet visits to Lincoln Heights, a secret pride, keeping her ownership of the district hushed to test her grit. Simone remembered Pierce's latest slight, "Not your lane," and anger flared. Her passion dismissed by her was her strength. She clutched the will, resolve rising. Morning sun pierced Detroit's gloom as Simone rose, the will afire in her hands. She'd face Pierce, not as a teacher, but as the heir. She called the district office under a fake name, confirming a board meeting tomorrow. Her podium. She spent the day teaching, guiding her kids through fractions, but her mind plotted. Pierce's cuts, her slashed budget, her endless grunt work, fueled her. She'd shaped young minds in secret, her lessons a shield, and now she'd claim her due. As dusk fell, she paused in the staff room, splashing water on her face. "For you, Grandma," she whispered. The class was hers now. That afternoon, Simone submitted a field trip request, hoping to avoid Pierce. "No luck." She caught her in the hall, her smirk instant. "Back with more fluff?" Pierce taunted, staff chuckling as she waved the form like trash. "This ain't your show, Davis." Simone stood firm, her voice low. "You'll see," Pierce laughed, tossing the paper aside. "Keep dreaming, teacher." Simone retrieved it, the sting sharp but fleeting. Tomorrow she'd rewrite the syllabus. Her bag held the will, a silent lesson building. The next day dragged as Simone prepared. Her blouse swapped for a jacket, the will tucked tight. She taught one last class, her voice a balm for her nerves. kids beaming as she praised them. At the district office, whispers buzzed of Pierce's latest squeeze, budget cuts looming. Simone lingered outside, peering through glass as Pierce strutted. She'd face her tonight, not as the teacher she mocked, but as the owner. As the clock hit 6, she took a deep breath, stepping toward the door. Her moment's bell was about to ring. The meeting convened in the district's formal boardroom, wood paneling under stark lights overlooking Detroit. Margaret Pierce stood at the head, her suit crisp, pitching austerity to a tense crew, art board members, principals, clerks. "We trim the fat," she boasted, smirking at their nods. Simone slipped in unnoticed, her bag over her shoulder. She watched Pierce mock her from afar, mimicking her chalkboard stance to laughter. The room hummed with plans to cut programs, oblivious to her presence. As Pierce wrapped up, she stepped forward, her voice cutting through. "Not yet." Heads turned, confusion shifting to sneers. Art Pierce grinned. "What's this, Davis? Lost your chalk?" Simone stood tall, pulling the will from her bag with unshaken calm. She unfolded it slowly, placing it on the oak table. "Read this," she said, her tone steel. Pierce snatched it, her smirk fading as she scanned the text. Silence fell, the city's hum. The only sound. "This says you own the district," she choked, face whitening. "Clara Washington's heir." Simone nodded. "Her granddaughter." "It's mine." Gasps rippled. Some knew Clara, a titan of education. Pierce laughed, brittle. "You? A teacher? This is absurd." Simone crossed her arms. "Call your lawyers. It's real." Phones emerged, whispers escalating as the truth hit. Panic swept the room as calls flew to legal teams. Pierce's bravado cracked, her suit sagging against Simone's resolve. Carol, her assistant, dialed frantically. Sweat beading. A lawyer, Mr. Hayes, arrived swiftly, his briefcase snapping open. He reviewed the will, then Clara's records, letters, a trust tied to Simone. "It's legitimate," Hayes said, handing over proof. "Miss Davis owns the district." Pierce's jaw dropped, the board reeling. Simone watched, her heart steady. Her lesson was landing. Simone stepped to the table's head, her voice rising. "Margaret Pierce, you're fired. Get out." Pierce sputtered, red-faced, but Simone cut her off. "You starved our kids, mocked our work. No more." Staff gasped, some filming as Pierce grabbed her bag, her exit a stumble. "Carol, you're gone too. Clear out." The assistant paled, slinking off. She turned to the board, her gaze iron. "Anyone with Pierce, leave now." Silence held, then cheers broke, her first chime of power. With Pierce gone, Simone faced the stunned board. "This isn't about cuts," she said. "It's about learning for all." She outlined her vision. More funding, fair resources, a district for every child. A principal, James, clapped first, others joining. Some filmed, #teacher, Queen trending fast. Teachers lingered in the hall, drawn by the shift. Simone waved them in. "Watch us grow," she said, handing Hayes the will to lock it down. She stayed late, sketching plans, new books, free lunches. The crew rallied, a school reborn. The next day, whispers of dissent emerged. 2 board members, Pierce's allies, grumbled about a teacher taking over. Simone called them out at Lincoln Heights, her voice firm. "You're done," she said, firing them on the spot. They stormed off, threats trailing, but she stood tall. James stepped up, offering support. "We're with you." Simone nodded, her resolve deepening. She hung Clara's photo in the office, her claim clear. The old lesson was fading. Simone dove into reforms, meeting with James and a young aide, Maya, to tweak budgets. She boosted funding, cut waste, her eye-spotting fixes Pierce ignored. Staff buzzed, drawn by the change, and Simone invited them to weigh in. "This is us," she said, sharing her plans. Maya grinned. "This'll lift 'em." She worked late, her vision sharpening, a district for the kids like hers. Twitter flickered with rumors, her takeover spreading wide. Days later, Lincoln Heights unveiled its new face, a grand reopening with bright classrooms, free supplies, a fresh vibe. Simone took the floor, her voice cutting through, calm, triumphant. Parents cheered, phones up, clips hitting TikTok, #district reborn trending. Enrollment spiked overnight. her name glowing. Reporters swarmed, but Simone kept it real. This is for the forgotten. She'd turned Pierce's dump into a haven, her first win resounding. Pierce didn't fade quietly. Rumors of a lawsuit swirled, her allies calling Simone a fraud. She faced the press, unflinching. Let her try, she said, Hayes by her side with proof. Twitter split, some cheered, others jeered, but her teachers drowned the noise, touting the new district. James and Maya stood firm, the school's a fortress. Simone smiled. Pierce's bell was silent. Weeks on, the district pulsed with life. Simone hired fresh talent Pierce had ignored, her eye-spotting grit. Test scores soared, grants buzzing. She fired more old guard, promoting James to deputy. Teachers rising. Twitter crowned her #district queen, clips of her takeover viral. She walked the halls, teaching still, her touch a lift. The system she'd claimed now shone, a testament to what care could build. One night, Simone stood alone in her office, Clara's photo glowing beside her. She traced the frame, her path flashing, mockery, grit, triumph. Pierce had begged for a role, blacklisted, broke, but Simone hung up. Parents cheered her name, but she stayed grounded. For you, Grandma, she whispered, Clara's voice echoing in her mind. She'd taught her way here, class by class. Months later, Simone stood by her office window, Detroit's skyline twinkling below. The district thrummed, new schools, fresh minds, a rhythm Pierce never allowed. She'd kept Clara's dream alive, turning it into a haven for all. From a teacher at the chalkboard to the queen of the district, she'd proven her worth. As she watched the city, Simone smiled. The education world had dismissed her, but now they learned her lesson, her district, her rules, her legacy.